this is one of the problems. And I don't watch Theo Von enough to know, largely what he does, to be honest with you. And I don't, I've seen a lot of examples of Joe Rogan doing this, and I have a feeling Joe Rogan does more politics than Theo Von, although, I have no idea. I remember when Mark Maron had Barack Obama on. And he largely, if not totally, stayed away from politics, the politics of the day. It was much more like, what's your experience being president?
Who are your guys?
Exactly. And he took some grief for that because, he had some experience doing political talk, and there were some things that, people felt that you have an opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity, to sit down with somebody that powerful. You take that opportunity to hold them to account in some respects. In retrospect, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because at least he's not asking questions that he's not capable of responding to.
Right.
And so, one of the problems that we have with like a Joe Rogan is that any Yahoo goes on there, says stuff to him, and Rogan is just like, whoa, okay. I mean, just gobbles it up.
And Theo Von is in this sphere, but he's shown like humanity. He's shown he's cried on air about Gaza. And the problem, though, is that I think he's starting to encroach on the Rogan space. And we saw this.
Mar-a-Lago.
We saw this with Rogan before, where like I think in the past, some people on the left, including myself, were like, okay, he's in the he's saying positive things about Bernie Sanders. This is somebody we can work with. But it's never about the individual. If Theo Von gets as big as Joe Rogan and he's getting a $200+ million deal with Spotify and things like that, it has been shown that there's clearly this incentive structure here with this new media for wealthy and powerful people to go on these shows and say whatever they want to say, because it's not a traditional journalistic format. We have all these problems with like Face the Nation or Meet the Press or whatever. But if you're going on those Sunday shows, these are political producers, these are political reporters, and you're at the very least in an arena where they could hold you accountable. But increasingly, that's not happening. And this ecosystem, this media ecosystem, is very well funded and very influential.
And the problem is, even if I don't know what Theo Von's intentions are, but don't ask the question if you don't know enough to be able to assess whether it's even remotely true. I mean, look, broadly speaking on some things, of course, but, and sometimes it's even trickier, and maybe he'll address it in a later show, which I think is also okay, and let's hope. But here is JD Vance lying to Theo Von, and to be fair, like, your average Joe wouldn't necessarily know enough to push back on this. But I hope after being sort of steamrolled by JD Vance here, that Von comes out in the next episode or whatever it is of his show and say, hey, I need to do a fact check, because he does. Here is Von talking to JD Vance.
Was Doge helpful?
It was. Yeah, it was. And I mean, look, Doge continues within the White House and within the executive of the country. I mean, look, there's a lot of ways in which we are wasting the American people's money.
Yeah.
Sometimes spending it on crazy stuff. Sometimes spending it on like actually counterproductive stuff. I think Doge has saved already at least 170, maybe $200 billion. Hopefully it's going to save more. But yeah, I think it was very
so
worthwhile.
Much money. How
it's
could
a ton of money.
How would you not even notice that? If that much money,
there's so much I could tell you about this. Okay, so one of the crazy things we all figured out like first week or so we're in the White House, okay, is there was a payment that should be stopped because the president signed an executive order to stop a payment. And this is like the day one of the White House for like, okay, how do we stop this payment?
Yeah.
Because somebody's trying to make this payment and nobody knew where like the computer was that actually wired the money from the US taxpayer to this entity.
God.
So, dude, the amount of waste and the amount of just grift in the federal government was off the charts. It's still, it's getting better, but there's still a lot more I think we can find.
Who was getting it? I don't know. I don't know one person that was getting something extra. I don't think.
Well,
unless everybody was slurping.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were slurping, man. You look at
Man.
you look at
A lot of people are slurping.
Well, yeah.
like,
Yeah.
So, for example, there are all these humanitarian programs that we have where we send money for people, for medicine, for food.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but like I think. Like what I thought before I got in the government, what most Americans think is, okay, so we send $100,000 to this group to buy food for like poor kids in Africa. Okay. And what actually happens is it's not $100,000 that go to the food for the poor kids in Africa.
Right.
That the NGO, the non-government organization that gets that money, contracts it out to somebody else.
Right, so
and
there's
then
a
they
middleman.
subcontract it out to somebody.
There's a
There's like
middleman.
3 or 4 middlemen. And what, Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, he's a very good friend. What he told me is that his best estimate after he had his team look at it is that 88 cents of every dollar was actually being collected by middlemen.
No
So
way.
every dollar we were spending humanitarian assistance, 12 cents was actually making it to people who needed it. That's crazy. So there's a lot of ways.
Now, all right, now he's lying here. It's a lie. There was a U.S. agency, a U.S. aid report. In 2024, 12.1% of the agency's money went directly to local organizations in foreign countries. The remaining 88% is distributed through organizations and companies that operate internationally. In other words, there's not a organization on the ground in Somalia where the guy calls up the USAID and says, okay, Venmo me the money. And if there was, they'd have a problem with that. It takes to distribute money like any other entities to distribute the money and the aid and to provide it in certain areas. It's just like any other enterprise. There is no charity that you give to where 100% of the money goes to the recipients, because they don't necessarily have the ability to go out and contract to have grain sent to them. It's just absurd. But
It's also, the question is also like, okay, it's inefficient, whatever. Well, then what did we save? What did we save? What will the results of those savings be? Because we know what the results of cutting USAID are. We know that children have already died. I don't know if you saw that segment that Lawrence O'Donnell did, where he started basically breaking down, talking about this boy who's an orphan who had HIV that has died within weeks of these USAID cuts because he had no family, but he was being kept alive because he was, I guess, HIV positive or had AIDS at this point. And next infection, that's how it happens. You die. You don't die of AIDS. You die of like pneumonia or whatever, right? Whatever infection that you get. And O'Donnell's point was, how many of these kids do we have already died? We don't know because no one's monitoring it.
And the point is that, like, if they knew of a more efficient way of doing it, they could have done it. Instead of just like closing the agency, essentially, they could have figured it out if they knew of one.
The idea that the United States is like spending all of our money helping the rest of the world is just completely belied by the fact of our inhumane foreign policy that we're currently engaging in. Like,
Also, just the difference between like what we spend on this versus defense, for
Right.
instance, which is also not the most efficient.
How many audits has the Pentagon failed?
0. I should say
Passed.
9. How many have they passed? Virtually 0. The number of audits that USAID is subject to is every year.
There was one interesting detail. Look at this is from Joey Politano. Catholic Relief Services, the largest recipient of USAID money, spent about 6% of the money they received on overhead and administration. 94 was going to people in need, and Elon impounded that money and blamed the Catholic charity.
And that dynamic is probably replayed over and over again with the other agencies.
With ones that are less sort of like on the face, sort of contrary to their message of like, I don't know.
An agency like that, to operate an agency like that, that would have relationships on the ground with all the people that they distributed to, would cost 10, 20, 50 times more. You need the apparatus one way or another. And all it would do would be replicate the existing agencies that are out there that knows their communities better. I mean, it's absurd.
You know, like a lot of these lies that the administration tells, there is like a very small grain of truth in what Vance is saying, which is, you know, like I've been to Haiti to do reporting there after a hurricane a few years ago. And one of the things I kept hearing from people there was like, yes, the aid agencies are inflated and they do sort of skim, and not just like financially, but also in terms of their sovereignty. Like when these aid agencies have so much power and authority that operates without any democratic checks from the local people, that creates a problem of influence. But that's not something that the Trump administration or any like recent U.S. administration is concerned about. They don't want to just, like Sam's saying, empower the communities by just giving the aid directly to people on the ground there who could probably do it smarter and more efficiently. That they are interested in peddling influence.
I mean, Haiti has the most NGOs per capita of any place in the world. So yeah, this whole structure doesn't really work, but that's not what they're not trying to make it actually work. As he says, it's not even going to the people in need. Well, let's figure out how to get it to the people in need then.
But every good conspiracy theory starts that way, with some sort of kernel of truth, or like one that's more pernicious and lasts longer. They expand on an already existing fissure in society or something that people are observing, and then you divert it in the wrong direction. And in this instance, it's being used to achieve, in my view, explicitly almost eugenicist ends by this administration, where they're in response to how the United States and the people here have been harmed by globalization, by free trade, by capitalism. They are choosing to basically allow for mass death for people outside of our borders who are also, and oftentimes worse, more harmed by globalization and capitalism, and by us. It completely removes our responsibility from the world. It removes the U.S. responsibility towards helping its own citizenry, because they're not doing that with this Medicaid stuff. They're going to immiserate us more for people further, and to the rest of the world. We're just a bully now, apparently.
We got one more clip of Theo Von talking about Gaza. Again, it's sort of like good for him to bring this up. But
well, he kind of has to, because his tears about it, despite going to Mar-a-Lago, his tears saying, "How are we letting this happen?" Like ask Eric Trump. But
Mr. Witkoff, but I never met him. But
Good dude.
Yeah.
You should have him.
I think I think the tough thing, just as a regular person, right? It's like we're seeing all these videos of people like picking up pieces of their children, and like,
of course,
it's the sickest thing I think it's ever been televised. Basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being
very
televised,
sad, man.
It feels like a massacre, and it feels like I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts, or you too. But I think where it gets scary is that we give.
I'm sorry, can you just pause it for a sec? I don't need you to. This is the problem with this platform. Like, you guys aren't shooting the shit in your basement, Theo. There's a difference between you having an opinion that it's genocide and the vice president of the United States having the opinion that it's genocide. It's not an opinion. He's one of the most powerful people on the planet. He has the ability to stop it, or at least put pressure on Trump to stop it. This is the problem with this format.
It's a mass. It feels like a massacre, and it feels like I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts, or you too. But I think where it gets scary is that we give we're complicit in it because we help fund like military stuff, and that's where as like a regular guy, you're like, well, I'm paying these taxes and they're going towards this, like, but you can't do anything, like you can talk, but it's like,
He can.
I don't understand how it becomes like tough for people. Like sometimes it feels like we look out for the interests of Israel before we look out for the interests of America.
So let me say a couple things. So number one, like, I think you're a great dude, so we don't always have to agree on everything. Do I think
Yeah,
it's
totally.
do I think it's a genocide? No. And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they got hit hard. And I
Pause it
think
for a second. Now, I just think that like if you're going to have, if you think something's a genocide, you should have the commitment to it to sort of be able to say like, well, for it to be a genocide, it doesn't necessarily involve the Israelis going in to do it. And they don't really have the capacity. They have the literal capacity to go in and kill just about every Palestinian. But if they did that, there would be much more repercussions than we see right now. Instead, what they're doing is that they're doing it bit by bit, and they're doing it slowly, and they're doing it in such a way that they are causing people and immiserating people, and they are destroying the sort of the fabric of any type of Palestinian society, literally wiping all of their housing off the face of the earth.
They're bombing rubble now.
So this is a moment where, like, if you're going to bring this up to the second most powerful person in the country, who's going to, push back and has a different opinion, you got a responsibility. Like, I know you're just a regular dude, except for the fact that regular dudes don't have millions of people watching them. Regular dudes don't get to sit down with the vice president. So if you're going to braise this, you have a responsibility. There is a legal concept, like, you're not legally responsible. If you walk by somebody who's injured on some level, you don't have the same legal responsibility if you start to engage to help.
But you can see,
because there's an implication that you know what you're doing.
You can see that he has the impulse to ask about it because he knows it's on his mind and he knows he's covered it before.
But we're bros.
But bro.
Hey, you're a good dude.
Well, this is just a response. This is just the point. Is that there's no sense that they have a responsibility to do this. And I get that he's a comedian. I used to be a comedian. He may have been funnier than me. It doesn't matter. I probably did more sitcoms. It doesn't matter. I have no idea what his career was. That doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if you're sitting there and having an interview with the vice president and you're bringing up these issues, good for you for bringing them up. But you also got to be able
He's not
to
capable.
push back.
Stand on business.
But he's not capable. This is not a show that is like meant for this. This is the problem with the format. This is the problem with, like, I don't know. I mean, the Rogan has the same issue.
But do I think it's a genocide? No. And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they got hit hard. And I think they're trying to, sort of destroy this terrorist organization, and war is hell. And that is true. I also think it's true, man. I mean, I've seen people on my side of the political aisle. I'm a Republican, you know that, but your audience may not, who will see these videos of these innocent Palestinian kids and say, oh, well, they had it coming to them. No. Like, if you have a soul, your heart should break when you see a little kid who's suffering, which is why we have the policy that we have, which is we're trying to eliminate the conflict, eliminate the source of the conflict, so that we can actually bring some peace and some humanitarian assistance into people. And that's my basic view.
What is the source of the conflict?
Hamas.
Is it just Hamas? Oh, okay. That's weird. That's weird.
Break.
Well, listen, Hamas has been around for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. They existed since the time immemorial and has always been the problem.
Yeah, the president's interesting. He's a pro-Israel guy.
Yeah.
And he also recognizes that to bring any conflict to a close, you've got to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And so, we've been attacked. I've been attacked. The president's been attacked for being too interested in diplomacy. And you ask, like, what can I do? I think that what people should demand is that if our tax dollars are going to something, we should be actively trying to fix it. Okay, that's kind of the way that I think about it. And what happened with the Biden administration?
Can you
man,
pause?
it's crazy.
Okay.
They were spending so much money all over
right,
the
it's
world.
fine. What do you mean you should try and fix it? People are doing that in the streets, and your administration is locking them up and deporting them. Okay.
They weren't engaged in diplomacy at all. So they'd sent, we sent $300 billion to Ukraine, for example, and you never had the president of the United States actually trying to force a diplomatic settlement. You talk about bodies all over the ground. Dude, the Russia-Ukraine thing is the most vicious. We see satellite images, we see classified images, man.
Yeah,
It is vicious. And again, it's I will hear people who
How
will say,
is
well,
it that we don't have something like a 1.5 million soldiers have died in this conflict, I think, in Ukraine. I'm not exactly sure. The ratio of civilian to military deaths, it's not even, it's not even remotely close. And the idea that you have to pivot to that when you're talking about Gaza is telling.
It's because it's the anti-war thing. It's the same dance Tim Pool did, right? When we were talking about this before even the genocide began, which is that the right pretends it's anti-war because there's a faction of the right that finds itself aligned with Vladimir Putin because of his, authoritarian nature and because there's some overlaps with conservatism here in the United States. And they've made that into, we're isolationists, we're anti-war. When you come down to brass tacks with the Zionists in the administration, they have no answer except to deflect. And Theo Von is completely not up to the task for this obvious deflection.
And this started off them talking about Witkoff. Witkoff, of course, he did some diplomacy, and then certain people got mad at that. And then it turned around, and it didn't mean anything. It was all a ruse. The Witkoff massacre, hundreds killed or wounded as Israeli forces opened fire on Gaza food aid site. This was after a supposed diplomatic outreach by Witkoff. They're building a mythology that has no bearing on the actual reality.
And we talked about this a little bit with Trita Parsi last week, but there's a very real possibility that right now, because Trump wants to be the deal maker with Iran, that his de facto position right now is he doesn't want to doubly piss off the Israelis by pursuing some sort of talks with Iran. So he's just letting them do whatever the hell that they want in Gaza to complete the genocide. And I think we're at a very real hinge point there, where just because Witkoff and Trump are talking around the Israelis and are trying to do something that we think is positive, hopefully with Iran, doesn't mean that has any bearing on the issue of the Palestinian genocide.
We're going to have Jasper Nathaniel on in a week or so. He's coming out with a piece about the moves that Israel's taking now to annex the West Bank.
Yeah.
Which we know Donald Trump promised Miriam Adelson as well. So we will see, we'll see where that goes. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.